and we are about to start our webinar, 3 Reasons to Build a Hybrid Cloud Infrastructure. Again, I'm Doug Soltesz. I run product solutions here at Cloudian, and I'm happy today to be joined by Dominic. Dominic, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Doug. I'm Dominic. I work as a technical marketing manager here at Cloudian.
And then, of course, we're very honored to have Rubrik on the line. Eshwa, could you please introduce yourself as well?
Certainly, Doug. Delighted to be here. Good morning, folks. This is Ishwar Balani. I am responsible for alliances at Rubrik, and I also drive product strategy. Earlier this year, we integrated Rubrik and Cloudian together, and I've been absolutely amazed at the response that the joint solution has received from the market. And hopefully, during the course of this webinar, we'll tell you a little bit more about the benefits, and at our end, we are very excited about the potential for the partnership.
Excellent. And so I can't agree more. We'll get the companies introduced, and then we're going to hit on the challenges currently facing IT. I think most of the attendees already know that they've got some problems with disaster recovery. They want to hear how to build their own hybrid cloud in their data center for disaster recovery and all the other functions that come along with that. And I think we've got 3 really compelling reasons why Rubrik plus Cloudian is the best solution out there. But why don't we ask you, Eshwa, to again take it away with, give us an introduction to Rubrik.
Certainly. So, Rubrik was started a little over 2.5 years ago. So this was in Q1 of 2014. And, the founding vision for the company really was to rethink how the secondary environment of the data center works. Our founders looked at, many different aspects of the secondary environment and realized that specifically as it relates to the data protection segment of this market, there had hardly been any innovation for over a decade. And, that's surprising. Just, given the rate at which technology evolves, we found a segment that, the last innovation was storage of data on disk, which was introduced by Data Domain over 10 years ago. So the company, got started. We introduced our first product. In just 18 months, we went GA. And that first 1.0 version was focused on data protection, so had features for backup and recovery. The response to our initial offering has been absolutely phenomenal, and we've grown very quickly. And in just 4 quarters, we now span across 5 continents. We've signed up over 150 channel partners. Shipped hundreds of appliances out in the field. Are already clocking over 8 figures in quarterly revenue. 10% of our customers are in the Fortune 500, and given the growth in revenue that we've had, I believe we are the fastest growing company in IT today. Clearly, all of this has been noticed by analysts and others. We've received many awards. I got a Cool Vendor Award earlier this year, and just last week we were awarded the Best of Show for VMworld 2016 in the data protection category.
No, I was at VMworld last week, and I certainly heard people talking about Rubrik being the hottest company in Silicon Valley, and that's quite an honor to have. So, I hand it to you guys. You've totally invigorated the disaster recovery market. Let me tell you a little about Cloudian. So Cloudian was founded in 2011. It was born in Japan, but we like to say based in Silicon Valley because that's where our office is today. That's where most of our employees are. And so you're really getting the best of both worlds. What does Cloudian do that nobody else does? We are an on-premise S3 solution. We're the only one that's 100% compliant with Amazon S3 API. We're giving you that object storage in your data center. And in fact, we are so good at working with Amazon that we're the only solution that's currently in the Amazon marketplace. It gives you a hybrid approach where you can put your data in Cloudian, tier it to Amazon. In fact, you can even go to the marketplace, buy it, get it metered through them. We have a global presence. Again, I'm currently in Silicon Valley, but we have sales folks and offices throughout the US, throughout Europe, and of course Asia. But I don't want to spend too much time on who Cloudian is. I want to jump right into the meat. what are the challenges facing your average IT administrator today? And I think the first one I want to hit on is the growth of data. And so an IDC report out there says that your data is growing by 50-fold between 2011 and 2012. And that's just making your world so much harder to manage. It's not just VMs getting bigger, it's VM sprawl. So if in 2011 you had 100 VMs, by 2020 they're either going to take up 50 times more space, or you're probably going to end up with 500 to 5,000 VMs depending on your environment. And the thing that you were telling me about earlier, Ashwa, is that that's not even the worst thing. The worst thing is the complexity of this data is growing out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. So clearly, as you said, data volumes are going up, but as we've seen, businesses transform and a whole host of new initiatives getting launched. Many of these have come up in just the last decade, things like mobility, the advent of big data, IoT, social, so on and so forth. There is just a plethora of applications out there that is driving a very large diversity of workloads. And so now you clearly have virtualized workloads, mission-critical workloads that need to run on physical environments. You have cloud-based workloads. You have robo environments, containers, SaaS. The list just goes on and on. And so if you couple this with the scale that we have, data volumes increasing by, you have a really big challenge, in our hands.
Well, and to make it even worse, there's still only 24 hours in the day. So if you're trying to back up your data, you're trying to get those short RTOs, RPOs, and you need to back up more data, take more snapshots, it's just working against you. And that brings me on to the next point, is that business today is always on. I talked about Cloudian, we're worldwide. When I wake up in the morning, I have emails from our guys in Japan, in EMEA. I know a lot of companies out there, the database can never go down. Their service, their website is selling to customers 24/7. If something happens, there's a hiccup, a bad patch, they need to get that system back and running immediately. Time is money. There can be absolutely no downtime in this entire environment. And to make matters worse, recent Gartner studies show that budgets are completely flat. In fact, the money you had to spend in 2014 is probably the same money you have to spend in 2020, because if anything, there's a slight dip over the last 2 years in IT budgets. And so you really are being pressed to do more with less, and that's really where the cloud and cloud-based approaches for your on-premise data center are going to help. So I want to introduce the solution. The solution is Rubrik plus Cloudian, and I think the simplicity speaks to itself. Ashwa, can you just lead us through what a Rubrik plus Cloudian solution looks like?
Certainly. So as you guys are seeing on the slide, what we have is a simple, layout of a set of production workloads. So these are running off of production servers. In this case, we've demonstrated virtualized workloads there. And just to give you a sense of, how easy it is to put the system in, you start by, unpacking and racking a Rubrik appliance and simply entering the vCenter credentials in this case, for example, and all of these workloads, get discovered dynamically. There are no agents involved to be installed. Backups start in less than an hour, and things are good to go. Now, as these backups start taking place, all the data that comes into the Rubrik cluster is globally deduped. So deduplication is not at a workload level or at a collection of workloads. It's global across the entire cluster, and data is also stored in a very efficient manner in terms of compressions and other forms of encoding. Doug mentioned the need for instant data access for the always-on business today, and if you ever needed the data back from Rubrik, you would have instant access. So the abstraction that you have is one of a time machine where you can go back to any one point of time in the past and instantly get access to the data. If you needed off-site protection for your data, we also support replication. So you're able to, have perhaps 2 different sites, and site A can replicate data to site B for further offsite protection. Now, most of our customers keep data in the Rubrik cluster for 60 to 90 days, and after 60 to 90 days, the data is usually migrated into long-term storage and a long-term storage tier. All of this happens seamlessly. It's entirely policy-driven. There's a single policy that controls, when data migrates out of the Rubrik cluster into long-term storage. And as you can see here, the integration that we have with Cloudian. Cloudian serves as that long-term data retention tier, and you can support that either on premises, in a private cloud environment, or as Doug said, you can access Cloudian via the Amazon marketplace as well. There's a lot more to describe in terms of how the two systems work together and the benefits and how we address the three challenges, and we'll be doing that over the course of the next few slides.
Exactly. So, I mean, one of the things that I love about this is it's simple. You can get it up and running in a couple of minutes. And again, as you said, people are tiering their data out in 30, 60, 90 days into the cloud. And the reason they're doing that is we know that most restores are happening within the first week or two of a backup actually occurring. And so let's move on to how do you protect at scale. Protecting at scale is very much a cloud idea. And around that, we actually have a poll for you. So we want to know, what is your biggest challenge with data protection? Is it managing the complexity? Is it the inability to meet your service level agreements, how quickly you can get the data back to the actual end users? Or is it a lack of scalability? Is your backup solution today, your disaster recovery, just not able to grow as quickly as it needs to with the new VMs and data that's coming into your market? And so we've got some of the polls coming in. We'll just keep it open for maybe another 10 seconds. And right now it looks like the lack of scalability is really what's affecting end users out there. And I'm happy to hear that, because that's exactly what Rubrik and Cloudian are addressing. So why don't we close this poll? You've got the results up there on screen. Overwhelmingly, a lack of scalability is the complexity. And so moving on, how do we make sorry about that, get the poll to go away. Protecting at scale starts with a scale-out architecture. So scale up, that was certainly in the fad 10 years ago. You'd have a system and you'd make it beefier. Whether that was a VM and you're adding more cores to it or more memory or more RAM, today you scale out. When you go to Amazon and you spin up an instance and that instance hits 100%, you don't try to grow it bigger. You spin another instance and another one until you have 5, 10, 20, and you move on demand to the scale that's required. You need to make sure that your scale gives you the ability to rapidly ingest your data. When we talked before about backup times and backup windows, we said that if you can't get the data in multiple times in a 24-hour period, you are not scaling up the way that your business requires. And last but not least, the complexity has to be low. When I use Google, when I use Amazon, I've got a nice interface. I'm able to click a few buttons. It's intuitive. I didn't have to go to a week or a month of training. I don't have to get a certification. I'm able to just consume. And so with that, I want to start talking about a scale-out architecture, which is exactly what Rubrik gives you.
Thanks, Doug. Yes, that is one of our founding tenets at Rubrik is, all our founders, they come from Google and Facebook and so on. And fundamental to the, web scale architecture is the notion of scaling out. And so when we were first looking at the space, none of the legacy products had this in them. And it's a big differentiator for, Rubrik in the marketplace. So all our IP is in software, and for ease of consumption, the way we've packaged our offering is to install it in a commodity hardware and ship an appliance out of the box, out of the gate. So these appliances are 2U appliances. We call them bricks. Depending on the SKU, they may have 2 or 4 nodes per appliance, and they have a mix of SSDs and hard disk drives. Pretty commodity off-the-shelf hardware. Now, what makes this all come alive is the intelligent software fabric that is installed on this hardware. And one of the key aspects of Rubrik's architecture is that the bits of software on all of our nodes are identical. So there is no concept of a master or slave-based architecture in the context of this being a scale-out system. All nodes are identical, and as you need more capacity, you scale by adding nodes incrementally, and all of these nodes dynamically join into a cluster. It's a shared nothing architecture and has no single point of failure. So genuine, truly fundamentally built for a scale-out world, masterless architecture design that seamlessly expands to meet your needs in terms of workloads that you are trying to protect.
And I honestly can't echo you more. Cloudian is exactly the same. It's a completely scale-out system. We can run on commodity hardware, so you can bring your own hardware, and we can provide you the Cloudian software. That hardware can be heterogeneous, so if you've got a couple of old nodes running, whatever it is, VMware, and you've got 12 disks in them, you can get your new VMware servers, you can add Cloudian in. We also sell appliances, and so we are able to take you from 100 terabytes of easily usable data all the way up to multiple petabytes of data. The scale is you add new nodes. These nodes can be around the globe. They can be in a single data center, a mix of both. But at the end of the day, what you need today is a scale-out solution. You don't need scale-up anymore. And that brings us on to our next point, rapid ingest. I can't have my VMs and my system stunned or down because of a backup. How do I get the data in quickly, Eshwa?
Yeah, that's becoming an increasingly, big problem, and it's something that we've paid a lot of attention to. As you described in your opening section, Doug, in terms of the challenges, the volumes are not just increasing by 10 or 20 or 30%. These are really growing in terms of multiples, across years. And the number of hours of the day, as you said, is the same, and we have increased pressure on RPOs, so people want to take backups more frequently. Now, again, one of the founding principles in terms of our design, and we apply this across all workloads, is we take a first full, but then all backups after the first full are incremental only. And that makes for very efficient data transfer, because every time we take a subsequent backup, we are only transferring the blocks of data or the bits of data that actually change. And we don't have to move another full each time we do a backup. Given the streamlined and converged nature of our architecture, we have all our appliances running within a cluster, and it's a converged data management approach. There is no proxy or any kind of middleman here that takes data, stages it on a disk, and then moves it somewhere else. All data moves very rapidly directly into the Rubrik cluster, and it lands in a flash tier, so the ingest is really, really quick. We have, fine-tuned our own VSS providers to make sure that the application stun is negligible, is as minimum as possible. That is a well-known problem. As you think about taking backups in the virtual world, the app stun issue is a big one, and we've addressed that. Have many case studies on how customers have overcome their stun issues from legacy-based approaches. One of the strengths of having a scale-out architecture is you have an entire cluster of machines, and you can flex the muscle of that cluster by having parallel data ingest streams. So all the data that's coming into Rubrik across maybe hundreds and thousands of VMs or tens of thousands of VMs that you may have, that comes in as parallel data streams into our cluster. We also support SAN transport mode for data transfer, where you can bypass the entire ESXi host and get data directly from your storage array. So, lots of attention and enhancements that have gone into this area to make sure that we can ingest data at scale, given the very stringent windows that we have today.
And it's not just fast. I want to highlight the lack of complexity. So as you said before, complexity is driving admins to pull their hair out. That's one of the things that comes along with data growth. Tell us about the policy-driven approach that Rubrik uses to reduce that complexity. And we actually have a video on this later that Dominic's going to present.
Certainly, Doug. So again, when our founders were first coming up with the notion of the system, what we saw in traditional approaches were imperative systems, and we took a very different declarative approach, and I'll describe these two concepts in just a second. So when I talk about a declarative framework, the areas of focus in such a framework resonate with what the needs of the business are. So it's more focused on the what, and you have abstractions that are at the business level, at a higher level, versus an imperative approach, which is what you'll find in legacy systems today, that are very, very focused on the minutiae and the details and the how. So while in Rubrik, you get to define policies that relate to business concepts such as your RPO, and RTO in Rubrik is near zero. It helps you define your retention policies, archive and replication concepts. All of these are entered into the system, as Dominic will show you guys, at a much higher level of abstraction. And once you define these policies, these declarative policies, you assign your workloads, and then they are protected under those policies, and then how frequently backups get taken, and how long they're retained for, and where they stay, either on a local cluster or in the cloud. All of that is somewhat transparent to you, and you don't have to deal with the details there. Now contrast that with an imperative approach, which will get into actually writing specific jobs, for when to take backups and how long to retain them, and how to consolidate them, and how to migrate them. That starts becoming really complex and really hard to do at scale, and that really increases TCO as well. So we've taken a fundamentally very different declarative approach, which frees up our customers from the very imperative, burdensome handholding that they have to do with traditional systems.
Great, and when we talk about Cloudian, we're policy driven as well. In fact, we inherit our policies from the actual S3 standard that Amazon pushes out there. When you think about Amazon S3, you think about policies like how durable is my data, whether I'm storing in S3 standard or IA, or how available is my data, am I storing it in S3 or am I storing it in Glacier? Well, Rubrik and Cloudian, we can do the same thing together. In Cloudian, you can create a bucket, and when you create a bucket, you can assign it to use replication, because maybe that data needs to be in multiple geographic sites. You can assign erasure coding. Erasure coding allows you to give extra durability to a bucket of data. In fact, we even have the ability to replicate our erasure code across multiple sites. So you can have a site in New York, Texas, and San Francisco all backing up to Rubrik, and then that Rubrik data can go into a Cloudian bucket or multiple Cloudian buckets, each protected in different ways. You can add encryption to these buckets to ensure that your data is untouchable by anybody else. If we weren't talking about Rubrik, I would add in that we can talk compression, because obviously Rubrik's already compress and dedupe the data, but for any other data in your environment, you can choose the level of compression and the information lifecycle management of that data. Does it tier to other sites? Does it move to a less costly tier of data over time? Or maybe that data just ages out of the system as well. It's really up to the system admin and the user to pick what they want their environment to look like. Any user in a backup environment would be able to choose, I want this bucket to be replicated to 2 locations, I want this bucket to be replicated to 3 locations, and you know what, this bucket has my most critical data, increase the durability of it. And this is all policy driven. I think, Dominic, you're also going to give us a quick little demo of this. And that moves us to our next phase. We want to talk about the second issue. Your business needs to be always on. And before we get into what always on means to us, we want to ask a question to the audience. And our question is, how long, on average, does it take you to recover a virtual machine? So let me know if with your current solution you can be up and running in minutes. If a user tells you that there's something wrong with their virtual machine, is it going to be an hour or two? Would you tell them, hey, we'll have it up by tomorrow? Or is it on tape and that's going to take a day or two to come back on site and you'll have something for them later in the week? All right, we've got the poll coming in, and overwhelmingly it looks like most environments out there are already able to recover in an hour or two, which is great. But what we're going to see next, and why don't we go ahead and close the poll and put the results up on screen. What we're going to see next is that with Rubrik plus Cloudian, no matter where your data lives, if it's on the Rubrik appliance, if it's aged off to Cloudian, you're going to be up and running in minutes, maybe even seconds. And so let's just dive right into that. What does always on mean to us? Well, the first thing is, if I want to restore data, I've got to find the data I want to restore. And that's got to be easy to do. I want a predictive search. When I go to Google and I start typing in, what I'm looking for, it fixes my spelling mistakes. It helps me find the data I'm looking for. I need to be able to find the data before I can restore it. Once I've found the data, I need to be able to get that running instantly, literally in an instant. I need to make that available to my business because time is money. And lastly, the solution that I'm using to restore this data has to be always up. And this kind of goes back to that scale-out approach, no single point of failure. I want to make sure that my data, my company, comes first. And so really, Eshwal, what I've got to ask is, why is anybody still using tapes, especially when we see the results of that poll that business needs to be up and running in an hour? If your most critical assets are on tape, that might be a good long-term retention, put it in a salt mine. But if you need that data back, tape absolutely is not going to give your business the recoverability that it needs. In fact, you're not going to get predictive search. You're not going to get that ease of management. None of the things that we're talking about for always on. Maybe you could lead us through what Rubrik looks like, how it gives you that predictive search capability.
Yep, I'll definitely get into that, Doug. But on the issue with tape, I do understand that this is a legacy medium that many folks have inherited, or that's just the way business has been. But it's quite remarkable because many of these tape archives can go back 10 or 15, even 20 years, and even though the tapes might be around from 20 years ago, it's not clear that the drivers to read those tapes are even around, because most of them have gotten obsolete. So, many of the customers that we deal with, they have the most weird issues that arise with, managing and maintaining the tape environment. On the surface, tape is clearly, seems like a cheap media, but as you get into the details, which, many of the audience members here probably deal with on a monthly basis, that there's a lot of complexity there. So, how do we address some of that complexity? The slide here talks about predictive search, and the first thing you see with Rubrik and in the joint solution that we have is you have a single pane of glass to search for all your information, and it can reside, either on premises or in a cloud type of environment. You don't have to go through different catalog servers and index servers trying to figure out, where certain files or folders might lie. What you're seeing here is a screenshot where the user is trying to search for, a file or a folder that begins with host. Again, the search, it's predictive in nature, so it takes a substring and matches for all the files and folders with that substring. And then goes through all matches. And then once the user identifies, the specific file that they want to download, you get a very seamless view of the entire history of the file. So this notion of the time machine abstraction, you get a sense of if the file is local, or if the file is in the cloud, and then you can pick the right version that you want to restore, and you can restore it back into the original VM. So that's the flow, single click kind of approach, all web user interface driven, all happening instantly.
And again, looking at the screen, we can see that you're searching a Linux-based machine here. I know it works exactly the same for Windows-based machines. And to your point, as you can see on the slide, it absolutely does not matter if that image is running in the cloud. Rubrik's going to have that search. You're going to be able to index your data and bring it back in near zero time. But I think even more sexy about the product is, how do I recover an entire virtual machine with near zero RTO?
Certainly, Doug. So this is a really, a sexy feature that's part of the, the Rubrik platform. So I can quickly walk you guys through how this works. You have an environment here where a VM is running on an ESXi host, and then for whatever reason, the VM goes down or needs to be recovered. Maybe it's hit by a virus, maybe it crashes. So the first thing you do is, you come into Rubrik and through a very similar, UI as we saw before, you would try to search for the specific snapshot of the VM that you wanted to recover. And once you did that, you would hit one click with said restore, and voila, you get your recovered VM. It is really as easy as that. Now, behind the scenes, clearly there's a lot of work going on, and all of this is happening, very, very quickly. We get in touch with vCenter, and then the ESXi host in which you want the VM to be restored. And what we're doing here is an instant recovery. So the new VM, if the old VM still exists, we'll power it down, and then we will start the new VM. And we have all the data for the new VM. There is really no synthetic full or combination of incrementals that you need to do on your end to create any synthetic full or any of that. We automatically expose all the data for the VM through Rubrik as a data store, and that gets mounted on the ESXi server, and then we ask the server to start the VM. So this usually happens in a matter of seconds. It really depends on how quickly the ESXi server powers up the VM and then connects it to the network. Behind the scenes, Rubrik's data store gets instantly mounted onto ESXi, and we are ready to go from that point on. So this causes data to be retrieved with near zero RTO. And so if you've seen in both these two cases, whether you're restoring files or folders or entire workloads, the data is instantly made available, and you could use this for just normal recovery, or for spawning up entirely new environments. For example, if the use case is for test and dev, or different types of analytic workloads that you might want to run, or for DR.
And what I like about this is it's regardless of locality. And so even if that backup has aged off into Cloudian, one of the things that you think of when you talk about object storage is, I've seen the metric out there, they talk about drinking from a fire hose. Cloudian is absolutely able to give Rubrik back the data it needs in the fashion needed, so that at the end of the day, to your point, ESXi is going to be your bottleneck. Actually getting it to set up the network links and spin up that VM is where your stop point is going to be. And so even if you set your data to age out after 20 days, you can be assured that with a touch of a button, it's ready regardless of where that data is currently sitting. And that leads us into our next point. Your data has to be always on. Always on means that you need a self-healing architecture. And a self-healing architecture goes back to that scale-out approach. There should be no single point of failure. In fact, when you create a framework, when you tell it how to do your backups, you just want to set and forget. If something goes down, you want a proactive alert. If you have any problems in Cloudian, we have what we call smart support, where our support team actually gets the notifications and might tell you ahead of time about the problems in your system. You want your data load balanced. both Rubrik and Cloudian are going to take the data ingested and spread it across all the nodes. They're going to handle that data distribution for you. There's no more setting up snapshots or policies where you have to determine that this data is not mounted or when it replicates. You put the data in, it's seamless, and if anything goes down, the system starts healing for you. You sit back, you relax, you drink your coffee, you know your data is still available. And honestly, the best part of all of this, oh, go ahead.
Doug, and yeah, there was one more important comment I wanted to make on this slide, which is, folks get the notion that, jobs and data can be redistributed. But many legacy approaches have, weaknesses around how metadata is stored, and typically the metadata is becomes a single point of failure. With the masterless design architecture that our systems have, the metadata is also scaled out across the entire cluster, and you don't have that problem with our approach.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I kind of group that into saving total cost of ownership. If you can make it where there's nothing that fails, that means there's less complexity. It means I, as the IT administrator, I've got time to do other functions during the day. So let's look at the status quo, just like you were talking about a second ago. You've got this database server, it's holding your catalogs or whatever you want to call it, and you've really got a lot of complexity here that can be removed. Why don't you tell us, what a current system data center status quo looks like?
Certainly, Doug, and this is something that we see very often going into a prospect account as we dive into how they're protecting their workloads currently. It's a legacy tool that might be used, and it's very common for them to have custom tailored, very painstakingly custom tailored a solution that has a dozen or so different components, different types of components, and large numbers of each type of component. So as you go in, and in many of your environments, possibly there might be a setup something similar to this, where you have several backup proxy servers. You may have several backup servers as well. You then have database server that serves as the catalog. You may have a search server. You may have WAN optimizers, dedupe appliances, and then of course there's tape, and then moving tape off-site. Clearly, this is quite a fragile infrastructure as you think about the multiple patches and frequent firmware upgrades that need to happen. Worry about compatibility across the different vendor solutions. The headaches from hands-on management of day-to-day data protection jobs across this fragile infrastructure, the licensing complications of having to deal with different vendors, and when it actually comes times to restore, you're not even sure that you'll be able to get all your data back. So clearly, this system of or the current approach of creating like a mini data center within your data center to back up your data center is broken, and as we see in terms of the status quo, and is in need of a change. And what we've done at many customer sites is replaced all of that with a modern approach with Rubrik and Cloudian, as you can see here. Simple, elegant, beautiful, that scales out with lower complexity and hence lower cost of ownership. And we have demonstrated across different clients that the Rubrik plus Cloudian solution has 30 to 50% lower TCO as compared to a traditional approach, not counting the other benefits that you get from the system. So as you break free from legacy software backup licenses and hardware and tape media, and enter this new modern world, you get a big bang for your buck on the bottom line as well.
And at Cloudian, we want you to break free from your monolithic arrays as well. Hey, those arrays are fine for running your VMware VMs, but they're not a good value to back up your data to. In fact, with Hyperstore, we can price it just like you do when you go to Amazon, you get data in the cloud. On average, you're talking 1 cent per gigabyte per month. That's the hardware plus the solution, plus the software. at the end of the day, we also have a software-only approach, and this is for sub-petabyte. I'm not giving you pricing of, hey, I've got 100 petabytes of data. What kind of pricing can you give? Obviously, if you've got multiple petabytes of data, this is even better for you. You're going to have less space used in your rack. You're going to use less power and cooling, and you're going to save money overall. And with that, I want to bring you to the meat, where Dominic is going to take it away. He's going to give us a quick demo of both the SLA interface inside Rubrik, and then he's also going to show you a policy-based approach and how easy that it is to add a new VM inside of, or not VM, a new node inside of Cloudian. And why don't we start with the Rubrik approach?
Thank you very much.
That up.
Thank you very much, Doug. So SLA domains is used to identify the service level agreements between IT teams and other business units. It's based on the following metrics: the recovery point objectives, the retention, which is the length of time to keep the data around, and the recovery time objectives, which is the length of time it takes to bring back your application or service. This information is actually captured in Rubrik's policy details for data protection. In a few moments, we will walk through the policy controls for data protection. Let's start from the dashboard and select the SLA domain. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner, let's choose to create a new SLA domain. From the big brick itself, as the administrator, you can choose to name the SLA domain. Let's build one based on precious metals. In this example, we will choose to name this SLA domain Platinum. Let's continue the process of configuring our SLA domain by completing the policy details. The take snapshot column is how you would define your RPO. This is to identify when to take your backups. The keep snapshots column identifies your retention period for your SLA domain. So you can choose the attributes for your SLA by hourly, days, months, or years, and decide on the retention period that will meet the agreed upon SLA. Let's just choose in this example to do a snapshot every 2 hours. Notice that keep snapshot column shows the field is required. We will keep snapshot for 2 days in this example. By the end of day 2, we will have 24 backups. The next step we will also want to try is to keep 1 daily backup for the entire month. Let's just say we choose 1, and this will result in 1 backup every day for the entire month. Now let's take a look at the cloud archival policy. This actually defines how many backups remain on-premise and move off-premise. The solution is very simple. Rubrik administrator can easily use the slide bar to determine how many days to keep the data locally and when to move the data to the cloud storage. You can move the slide bar back and forth to set your cloud archival policy. In this example, we will move it to 20 days. The cloud archival scale is based on the longest RPO value for the SLA domain. In this example here, the SLA domain has an on-premise RPO of 30 days. Select to create your SLA domain when you want to complete everything, and the SLA domain creation process will create this new policy for you. So folks, we have just easily and simply created a new SLA domain within Rubrik for data protection in just a few simple steps. This is pretty cool. So the main gist of it is simplicity, ease of management, right? And the other thing also is that it's scale out and it's protecting your modern day data center.
I love it, Dominic. So, I've certainly worked with multiple backup providers, and, that same process you just outlined would have taken me a lot more steps in other products. Why don't we just move right into, what Cloudian looks like?
Certainly, Doug. Thank you very much. So in this particular video demo that you're about to see, we will show how easy it is to scale out your Cloudian cloud storage. What you're going to be looking at is actually Cloudian Management Console, or we call it the CMC for short. As you can see, the UI is very feature-rich, as it allows you to look at the capacity of the entire cluster, the analytics, which includes object transactions, throughput per second, and any newly created buckets with users within your cluster. Now, this is a very new configuration, so we'll just take a look at the entire setup here. So let's take a look at the node level. You can see I can look at all the services on each particular node that's up and running. Additionally, when we go back to the dashboard itself, you can also see some alerts and also look at the entire region in terms of the transactions per second, number of nodes in this example. So in this test, we're going to create just a simple add node, how quick it is to scale out. We'll put the IP address, the Ethernet connections, and the installation user's password, and click on Go, and OK. And that's how easy it is. You actually just deploy your scale-out infrastructure for cloud storage. It is that simple, folks. In comparison to the other solutions that's out there, you gotta have to do a lot of CLI and add the rest of these other things. With Cloudian, it's just a few simple mouse clicks. And there you have it, folks, in terms of deploying a scale-out infrastructure and also adding a new node to it. The next that I want to show you is to look at how we can look and confirm the number of nodes. So you can see there was 4, and this is the Cloudian node 4 that was just added into this environment. It is that easy, right? So let's take a look at the storage policy that Doug was actually talking about. So the storage policies are actually logical storage policies. When you create a policy name, for example, in this one, we'll give it Gartner storage policy, you can actually decide on the data distribution scheme. And at the data consistency level, you can decide what you want to choose, all, quorum, or even 1. In this example, we just choose 1. Save it, and you just created your logical storage policy. It's scale out in nature. You can create all of this very easily. At the user level, you have the granularity to set QoS on a per user basis, or the group, or at the bucket level. This is that simple, Doug, in terms of deploying out a scale-out storage solution.
No, in any, as you can see from looking at both of those web UIs, it's simple, it's elegant, whether you're working in Cloudian, whether you're working in Rubrik, it's intuitive. You can create policies, you can add a node, everything's a touch of the button, you're up and running, you're not spending a week here or 2 weeks here trying to get certified in a solution.
Right.
So at this point, let's why don't we switch to taking some questions from the audience, and I see we already have a couple in there. So the first one is, would the Rubrik be the same as the Cloudian box and run at the same time? So the answer is no. Rubrik creates a brick, and that's a purpose-built piece of hardware for your disaster recovery. Cloudian, we're going to have separate appliances. They're going to have separate drives in them, and these appliances are your on-premise S3. So think exactly what you get out of Amazon in the cloud, but on-premise. Why do you want it on-premise? Well, I don't know what kind of bandwidth you have to Amazon S3, but most likely you don't have multiple 10 gig pipes like you would on-premise. And so you're going to want to deploy on-premise so those Rubrik bricks are able to access the Cloudian storage in a timely manner for your instant recovery. But of course, the Cloudian storage can do much more than be a repository for backups. We can take video media, we can take surveillance media, we can be a source of data for HPC clusters. Anything that you do with Amazon S3, you can run on-premise against Cloudian as well. Whereas Rubrik is very focused on this one purpose-built application of protecting your data, doing it seamlessly, and anything to add there, Eshwa or Dominic?
Yeah, I do. Actually, to your point as well, Doug, is that the Cloudian solution and Rubrik, it's one of the data protection strategies, right? The other thing also is the capability to be able to do multi-tenancy. The multi-tenancy gives you the capability to use your storage for more than just one particular solution. And this is where Cloudian excels in that environment.
So another question came in, and it says, if I have compressed files on Cloudian, we talk about ingest speed. What about digest? What if I need to get it off fast? So it's funny, when people think about compression, they always think about, or dedupe and whatnot, they think about a lot of CPU time, and they worry that that's going to slow down their environment. The actual truth of the matter is, it's the spinning disk that are the slow point. That's the whole reason we're moving from tape to spinning disk. Spinning disk is what's going to slow you down. And so the amount of time that it takes an Intel CPU to decode a file, to uncompress it, is not even a millisecond. You know, we're talking microseconds here. Whereas the time for the hard drive to sync is generally in milliseconds. And so when you send data to Rubrik, it's going to ingest it in SSD. It's going to move that over to spinning disk, and it's going to send it to Cloudian. Now, when it sends it to Cloudian, it's already be deduped and compressed. When Cloudian is asked to give that data back, the reason that object storage excels at this is object storage is able to send multiple simultaneous connections to any one or multiple sources. And what I mean by that is, let's think about your standard NAS. If your standard NAS, you have CIFS or NFS. Let's assume I have a really big file. That really big file, you start at the beginning and you copy it all the way to the end. When we start talking object storage, what Rubrik's doing is it's breaking that data into hundreds or millions of pieces. And all of those pieces can be moved in parallel across the wire. Generally, when you think about a NAS, you go, okay, if I have 4 users or 100 users simultaneously pulling a file, it's going to start slowing down. It's really good at sending one VM, one file really quick, whereas object storage is absolutely maximized to do that fire hose of data, to send 100, 200, 300 concurrent streams of objects to something that can handle it like a Rubrik appliance. Eshwa, there's a question for you. This question is, we talk a lot about VM workloads, but is Rubrik also able to handle bare metal like a Cassandra database backup?
Yes, that's a good question. So like I said, in the presentation, we've had 2 major releases, and the focus of both those releases have been on the virtual side of the equation in terms of virtual workloads. Clearly, the largest segment of workloads out there was virtual, so that's where we started in the spirit of having focus in an early stage company. But we've recently announced our next major release, which is going to go into early access very, very soon. And with this next major release, we have announced support for bare metal or physical workloads as well, specifically databases and operating systems. So all of that is coming in our next major release, and we'll continue to expand the specific applications that we will be able to protect. One of the key aspects of our approach is the platform has been built in a workload agnostic fashion. So all of those different workloads that we discussed during the challenges section, the idea is we would expand to support all of them in the near future.
All right, we have another question. Is the Rubrik archive measured in days? For most, archive duration is measured in months or years, not days. So that goes back to your demo, Dominic, and to save time, we tried to make that demo as quick as possible. But I think the first thing you saw was that Rubrik gives you 4 tiers of what you would call grandfather, father, son archiving. The first one is, I want to take a snapshot or a backup of my data every hour and keep it for a certain number of days. The next thing is, I take a certain number of days of backups and keep them for a certain number of months. Then that goes months to years and years onward. The Rubrik system is very intelligent, and so in Dominic's demo, he only did the first 2 lines because we were trying to save you time. We didn't go through all 4 fields, and because he put 1 in for the month, saying that he only wanted to keep his data for 1 month, that slider bar automatically adjusted to only being 30 days. Had Dominic typed in 6 for the months, that slider bar would have been 180 days. Or had he gone to the next line and he said, I want to keep a certain number of monthly backups for a certain number of years, that slider bar would have dynamically adjusted. Now, Ashwa, chime in here, because I think that even though you can move that bar out to a year or 2, most of your clients are not choosing to try to keep a year of data on Rubrik. They're tiering out to the cloud very rapidly.
Yeah, most of our clients do keep data for about 60 to 90 days on the Rubrik cluster, and then tier the data out to an archive store. But I want to really emphasize one important point, which is there is the notion of how long the data stays in the Rubrik cluster, and that's what the slider actually controls, is how long do you want the data to be kept locally. But the policy actually defines your entire data protection period. So if you're archiving for 7 years, and we have customers who are, for compliance reasons and regulatory reasons, they need to archive for 7 years. And then so their policy would look something like, keep my annual snapshots for 7 years, but maybe keep data on the local cluster only for 90 days, but they know that any data that is older than 90 days will be automatically moved and consolidated into the archive tier. All of this, again, because the level of abstraction we're giving you is at the business level. You enter your business rules into the system. You don't have to worry about moving data around from one tier to the next, consolidating the data, expiring the data, migrating the data. All of that is handled for you seamlessly behind the scenes.
So the next question is there a specific advantage of using Cloudian with Rubrik versus other object file systems with Rubrik? And I think the answer is Rubrik has partnered with one or two other object storage systems. The advantages around Cloudian are multifold. The first one is we do 100% of the Amazon S3 API, and so a number of object storage systems out there today do not. And when I work with Rubrik, their engineers are very sharp. So the Amazon S3 API is extremely rich. You have things like multi-part uploads, you have multi-part upload copies, you have the S3 calls around encryption that Rubrik supports with us. And so other object stores out there today say do not support encryption at all. Or they support their own type of encryption, not the S3 standard, the SSEC and the SSE. And Rubrik will work with Cloudian on that. So all you have to do is put in your password when you're configuring the cloud archive, and it's going to do it just like it would with the Amazon cloud. You're definitely able to connect Rubrik to the Amazon cloud. Cloudian's able to tier to that cloud. Other minor points about other object file systems out there. Some object stores are eventually consistent only. Some are strongly consistent. Dominic kind of went through it a little bit quickly, but Cloudian gives you this bar that you can actually control your data. Your data can be in one bucket strongly consistent and in a different bucket eventually consistent. Now, of course, Rubrik has engineered their system to work with eventually consistent object store systems, but you can imagine that if you bought Cloudian and you're using it with Rubrik, you probably want to use it for some other task as well. Maybe that's your enterprise file sync and share, something like an own cloud. That data you want to be strongly consistent. Cloudian's the only one out there that's going to give you that bar where you can adjust your data. We support erasure coding, replicated erasure coding, replicas. I think we check the checkbox of more options than any other object store out there. Our pricing is right, and honestly, nobody else has the same support of Amazon as we do. We know about their advanced features before they come out. There are other webinars we're doing around advanced S3 functions like
AWS CLI commands.
The AWS CLI commands and whatnot. So, really give us a call after this, and we'd be glad to have one of our guys show you why Cloudian covers more behind object storage than anybody else on the market. Let's move on to another question. What is the ability to recover a VM to a different vCenter if the original vCenter is down or lost? Eshwa, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so as long as Rubrik is connected to the other vCenter, and we do have many customers, who use it for exactly the scenario described where the original vCenter runs into a problem. In fact, when we support replication and we move, snapshots from one cluster to another, the other cluster is usually sitting in a different data center with a different vCenter. And so we can certainly bring up those snapshots with by connecting to a different vCenter and on an ESXi host in that vCenter.
And Eshwa, I'd like to add that because Cloudian actually has that ability to replicate between data centers just like Rubrik does, your data, if you've got a San Francisco and a New York data center and you do the backup in San Francisco, you can absolutely back up that data to a bucket that you've told to replicate and have available in New York. Now, that's not your standard replication of you're waiting for it to be available in New York. It's as soon as it's in San Francisco, the Cloudian nodes in New York know of that data. And so even though there's the speed of light and we've got to move the data to New York, if you immediately did a pull of that data against Cloudian from New York, Cloudian would know, it would pull the data across the wire, it would save it to the bucket required in New York, and you'd start your restore, admittedly a little bit hampered by the speed at which your two data centers are linked. But we give you this single namespace of your data across all data centers. So each of those data centers can be backing up to a different bucket. You can have as many buckets as you want in the system. They can each be protected individually. And of course, your Rubrik configuration will be able to identify those and pull your data back, whether it's one vCenter, multiple vCenters, or you suffer a catastrophic loss and you've got to just absolutely rebuild your entire VMware environment. Now, we've got other questions coming in, and we are also out of time. And so we will get back to everybody that sent a question. We'll send an email out. I believe that there's also some handouts in the GoToWebinar right now. If you haven't downloaded those, download them now, please. And of course, we will be sending an email out. We'll send a slide deck out. We'll put it up on, what is that, slideshare.net or .com, the LinkedIn site, so that they're available for everybody. But if you want more information, hit our website, hit Rubrik's website. There's a joint solutions brief. And with Hyperstore, we definitely have a free trial that you can download. You can put on some commodity hardware today, or just run it in a VM or two to kind of get your hands wet.
Right, just to get the feel and see how it works out for you, and just, yeah, call us.
Well, I thank everyone for their time today. This has been great. And Eshwa, so good talking to you. I look forward to doing this again with you in the future.
Oh, likewise, Doug. This was a lot of fun, and looking forward to the partnership as well.
And Dominic, thanks for all your help. We'll get some videos online with even lengthier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is it. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone, and have a great morning, afternoon, or evening.
Thank you very much.